jury.
NBC News national correspondent Aaron Gilchrist and NBC News legal analyst Misty Marris both joining us now for a broader conversation. Aaron, let's start with you. I was able to actually cover this story pretty closely when it happened, as did many of the reporters at this network. Tell us more about that former county clerk of court, Becky Hill, who was at the center of this ruling and did have to testify before a judge a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Sam, there were so many tentacles to this story, a dramatic trial that played out in South Carolina that really did draw the attention of the nation. And really, Becky Hill is at the center of this decision by the South Carolina Supreme Court to overturn this conviction because they say she was at the center of him being denied a right to a fair trial. The court saying that as the clerk of the court there in Colleton County during this trial, Becky Hill, quote, placed her fingers on the scales of justice in suggesting that Alex Murdaugh could not be trusted in his testimony before this particular jury. And the court said that created this prejudice in the trial. Becky Hill would have been responsible for sort of managing the jury as it was going through this trial process. She would have managed the evidence as it was coming in and out of the court as well in many ways. And she would have been one of the very few people that a jury could potentially have contact with during the course of a trial. And now the court is saying that while she was accused of a crime of perjury and of interfering with the jury, tampering with the jury, and wasn't convicted of anything like that, still the court believes that she did have some influence over the jury's decision-making process that was improper. Both the prosecutors and the defense teams have weighed in here. The prosecutors saying that they do intend to retry Alex Murdaugh.
Let's bring Misty in now. Aaron, stand by. Misty, what do you think now for round two of this trial? What will the prosecution do differently this time around? And do you think there's a potential for a different verdict?
Yeah, I think the prosecution is going to have to do things differently because we talked about why this verdict was overturned and there's a new trial regarding Becky Hill's misconduct. But the second part of this decision was the defense saying too much came into evidence about Murdaugh's financial crimes. And the court said, we unanimously hold that the state went too far and too deep into Murdaugh's financial crimes. That's going to reshape the whole prosecution. For those of us who covered this trial gavel to gavel, a central theme of the prosecution's case was that these murders were financially motivated. So you take away some of that evidence, you take away the prosecutor's main theory, and you have the defense acting differently as well in response.
Because this was light on forensics, right? And you didn't have a murder weapon, so this could totally reorient the strategy, you're saying.
It absolutely could, because you're going to have a new judge, new evidence coming in. Everything's from the very beginning. And with these parameters, with this court's order about a limitation on what can come in on those financial issues, you could see a completely different case unfolding.
What about the challenges with the jury? Aaron, let me bring you back in here, and Missy, you can weigh in on this as well. But just the idea that the Murdaughs are such a high-profile family in South Carolina, this case was so widely publicized. What are the challenges with finding an impartial jury at this point?
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point there. It is going to be the responsibility, though, of this court, of the lawyers in this process to try to do that. As you noted, this is a name that people in South Carolina, all across that state, really are familiar with. The Murdaughs, Alex Murdaugh, his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, they were all prosecutors in that state. And so you've got generations of citizens in South Carolina who would be aware of at least the family name and potentially would have been following this trial, as so many people around the country were as well. And so that will present another challenge for prosecutors in seating a jury.
And how do you feel about that, Misty?
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a high-profile case. It's already played out once in trial that was televised. Countless documentary series about this case. It's going to be hard to find jurors who are going to come in without having any preconceived notions. But that's what the voir dire process is for. Jury questionnaires, not people who have never heard of it, don't know about it, but people that can put all of that aside and come in and just look at the evidence.
Here we go again. But to make it clear, he is serving 40-plus years on those financial crimes.
Correct.
He's not getting out of prison anytime
he
soon.
pled guilty to those. So he's serving that time, but this is the murder trial, so a whole different case.
All right, Misty Marris and Aaron Gilchrist on this breaking news today. Thank you both so much.